Hello all, Aaron Cato, April 23rd presentation for OL 608, the Capstone Seminar in Leadership, taught by Dr. Scott Livingston. Today I'll be speaking to and presenting a video through PowerPoint on understanding leader-member exchange, organizational citizenship behavior, and the impact on organizational commitment within assisted living. During the initial slide, I touched on my research topic, but drilling down further, this is LMX, or leader-member exchange, and the relationship to organizational citizenship behavior, which I'll refer to as OCB, and of course the corresponding effect on organizational commitment. We'll define these terms momentarily, but for right now, here's a visual that higher LMX results in OCB, which in turn produces organizational commitment of employees to the organization or to a boss. But it's not only interesting that LMX results in OCB, but you could also read this visual as LMX or higher LMX and OCB or higher LMX plus OCB results in or increases organizational commitment. Before we really dig deep, it's always good to have clarity on what we mean by LMX and what is meant by OCB and even organizational commitment. So when we're talking about LMX, we're really referring to the quality of relationship that develops between a leader and follower. You know, and this relationship's predictive of outcomes at three distinct levels. One's at an individual level, one's at a group level, and then of course at an organizational level. And relationships that exhibit a higher quality exchange between leader and follower are characterized by trust and mutual support and respect and things of that sort. What's interesting with LMX, also that's not reflected here on the slide, is that historically LMX was created as the name vertical dyad linkage. And it appears that the founders were really Grain and Olbein and their associates. LMX really consists of higher and lower quality exchanges. And then around the mid-2000s, a third level was added. So it's really referred to now with low level or mid-level and high-level exchanges between this dyad, the dyad being two components, in this case specifically a component of a leader and the component of a follower. Some questions even come up. You know, is this a linear relationship between LMX and what's called turnover intention, or is it a curvilinear relationship that exists between this quality relationship between the leader and the follower and the turnover intention or the commitment to the organization? And some debate continues in this. You know, people think different things in the literature. So we'll perhaps get into that a little bit later. But for right now, we're just looking at general definitions. OCB is really the role behavior. It's discretionary from a person. In fact, it's so discretionary that it has to be observed as voluntary. Discussion continues really whether or not OCB exists within a group. You know, when the whole group is engaged in an OCB behavior. You know, so for a quick example on that, if you have a housekeeper within the assisted living field, and this housekeeper goes above and beyond so much that they want to help the organization or the leasing department or even their boss, they want to help so much that they volunteer to clean a prospective client's home or a prospect's home, just to show the quality of work that's done at the organization. That's something that's certainly discretionary, it's voluntary, and it's so above and beyond that it has to be noticed. Well, the debate I was speaking to earlier is, if everyone, say all the department of housekeepers, namely 5 housekeepers, all do this action, it's interesting. Does it become OCB? Is it an individual OCB? Is this even noticed anymore? Because everyone does it, so it's not above and beyond. It's just the norm. And so there's some debate on this, but most people now recognize that as a group level OCB, even though it may decrease the observation of an individual level OCB. So from our brief discussion here, you can see that there's an OCB at an individual level and at a group level. Well, organizational commitment, there's really some different types of organizational commitment, and 3 key components here, 3 key types. There's affective, continuance, and normative commitment. And affective commitment really refers to an employee's emotional attachment to the organization, where continuance commitment refers to an employee's obligation to remain with the organization. And normative commitment is based on the cost that the employee would have to incur if they decided to leave the organization. Along with organizational commitment, you can really drill down to things like sportsmanship. And sportsmanship, loosely defined, is an employee's ability to not complain when things are not exactly the way that they would like them to be. It's a little more complex than that, but generally speaking. Now, all this with OCB and LMX and organizational commitment, what are we researching? What's a problem when these things are not in line with favorable relationships? Well, what happens, and the problem that comes up in companies beyond assisted living even, our leaders alienate themselves. They sabotage their own efforts. And it has unfavorable outcomes, but leaders do this through things such as authoritarian or command and control styles, or maybe some inappropriate pace setter styles of leadership that lower this LMX exchange between the leader and the follower and result in non-discretionary efforts, nothing above and beyond by the employee. It's just contractual. I'm just going to do my job and that's it. And it's interesting because seemingly, countless articles and books have been published, to help a leader, at all levels support, these relational styles and these emergent management styles, yet still to date, dissonant styles persevere. So let's look at this in a visualized format here. As we have low OCB and low LMX, when combined, you get a result that it would seem logical that you get decreased efforts by an employee and low organizational commitment, and seemingly you would result in a decreased NOI or a decreased net operating income. Now, I've made some claims here, like higher LMX and increased OCB result in organizational commitment, and then in turn have higher net operating income and things of that sort. So we're going to look at the body of evidence, and we're going to look at it in the form of a syllogism. And what that is a syllogism is a series of premises followed by a conclusion. And it's intended to be in a logical formation to formulate a logical conclusion that's more probable than not probable. And so when people present syllogisms, if someone wants to attack that or disprove it, you need to attack one of the premises and not go directly towards the conclusion. And so in our case, we have 3 premises. Premise 1 is supervisors are a primary agent for creating a higher-low leader-member exchange. And notice here that I'm not arguing or making a premise that they're the only agent, but they're a agent. They're a primary agent. So this seems pretty logical and pretty airtight, which leads us to premise 2, that OCB is a result of higher quality or high quality leader member exchange. the healthier the relationship between the leader and the follower results in OCB. That seems pretty airtight. The third premise is that organizational citizenship behavior is a correlate to organizational commitment. Now, notice I'm not saying that OCB is causal to organizational commitment, but it certainly correlates. I could argue that LMX is causal, with the link or the mediator of OCB towards organizational commitment. But for our premise, we're saying that OCB is a correlate to organizational commitment. So premise 1, premise 2, and premise 3 seem pretty airtight, which leads to a conclusion that a primary way to increase organizational commitment is for supervisors to engage in these leadership styles that encourage a healthy LMX. These leadership styles are coaching and transformational leadership and servant leadership and a lot of the emergent leadership styles. Let's look at this thesis of research visualized. So in our visual here, we have LMX as a primary gear, so to speak. That this gear is fueled by this relationship and these favorable management styles or healthy management styles. This gear, this LMX gear gets going and it turns and it fuels the OCB gear. And the OCB gear in turn turns organizational commitment. Now the slide's perfect. This can be confusing. Our arrows are not indicating an increase of LMX or a decrease in OCB or as a decrease in organizational commitment, but instead are just an indicator of which way the gears are turning. I just wanted to throw that in our video presentation for clarity. So LMX drives OCB, in turn OCB drives organizational commitment to a higher level. Now we have some comments here on the thesis or on the literature review. Is something that I personally noticed is that all these modern leadership theories such as LMX and OCB are all rooted in something that was created before. For example, LMX really draws from the vertical dyad linkage. As it was in its evolving roots, has turned down to LMX and even to group theory and teamwork. But also LMX seems to draw from the social exchange theory, which has these 3 components. Social exchange has LMX as a component, which we spoke to, and also has OCB as a component, which we've spoke to, and it also has equity theory. And while we aren't going to go deep into equity theory, again, generally speaking, it just maintains that subordinates and supervisors are most satisfied when the ratio between the benefits received and the contributions made is similar as compared to the perceived ratio of their coworkers. So that's what equity theory generally states. Second, some comments here are the assisted living industry resources. I'm going to head back up. The assisted living industry resources are seemingly inconsistent in their reporting on turnover rates. And this deals with direct care staff. This deals generally with just turnover in the assisted living field. And so it's difficult to really find objective employee turnover rates. The most consistent is really seeing turnover rates between, 30, 35% up to 200%. So even my comment is inconsistent. Those are huge ranges. So it's difficult to get an objective number within assisted living resources. Under the third combination here, third comment is I really used and referred and referenced some older peer reviews. And of course, I combined it with some relatively new sources too. But I wanted to speak to why that was done. Older peer-reviewed resources were actually the majority, and I really use those for 2 factors or 2 reasons. These older resources appeared to be authorities in the subject matter, and they appeared to be written in the mid-'80s to mid-2000s. I mean, it seemed to be a hot topic then. And the second reason is these newer sources displayed a theme of even referring to some key older sources that were written as early as the mid-'70s, although it was really prevalent in the mid-'80s to the 2000s. You know, I assumed that they referred back to these older sources for two reasons. The first is a reference to founders such as Grain and Olbein and Associates for LMX, key developers here, and also Oregon. Oregon was huge for OCB. You know, the second that I think this is the discussion of key meta analytics, such as Gerstner and Day, had a huge, seemed to have a huge influence on more modern thought regarding LMX and whether it's linear or curvilinear as the relationship increases. Does organizational commitment increase, or is it curvilinear and decrease at a high level? And their meta-analytic really seemed to influence future thoughts on the subject. These are the references, and why I'm not going to read you each reference. I want to point out some key ones here, like DeLuga was key in LMX and the relationship with OCB. Gerstner and Day, that I just referred to, their meta-analytics really seem to have an influence on future work. Also Ilias, you know, 2007 with LMX and citizenship behaviors, and their meta-analytic really had an influence. Also, Pallier is really a new source that's heavily involved in LMX and also OCB. And then Simons from an assisted living standpoint. Those are our references, and that's my video, and I appreciate you guys listening, and thanks a lot, and I hope it's been useful for you.